Hi all, and thanks very much for joining me today. I'm going to walk you through how to make these camper blinds that have got insulation sewn in, blackout lining, as well as a few pockets here for some extra storage. They're super simple to make, and I'm going to take you through it step by step so you can easily make these at home. Now first up, we're going to want to take a template of our window. So sellotape a few pieces of paper together, push it against your window and just draw around and cut out a template. Next we want to choose our fabric. So the first fabric will be your internal facing fabric, which will be seen on the inside of your camper van. The other will be the external facing fabric, which will be seen through the window of your camper van, and you can of course use the same fabric for both. I also like to pick a thread that will match with the colour of the fabric to make the stitching nice and discreet. So I've got a white nylon thread here. Nylon because it's preferred due to its elasticity and abrasion resistance. Now we can take the template to our internal facing fabric. Grab a compass and a pencil and stretch it out by 1/2 inch. Now we can use the compass to scribe around the template with the fabric face side up. This additional 1/2 inch will be our seam allowance, and if you're new to sewing, a seam allowance is the area between the stitching and the raw cut edge of the fabric. Once you've gone around the entire template, we can then use a rotary cutter or some upholstery scissors, and we can cut this out following the pencil line. Now we can take our newly cut out fabric and use it as a template for our external facing fabric. This way the 1/2 inch seam allowance will already be incorporated. So go ahead and scribe around your template and cut out the material. Later, when the internal and external piece of fabric is sewn together, we want to hide the stitching to give a much cleaner look. And to do so, we will need to effectively sew the fabrics inside out. We'll then need to turn them the right side out, and to do so we will need the means to reach inside the fabric, hence this next step. So take your newly cut external fabric and measure and mark the halfway distance from top to bottom. If you have a curved template, measure from the lowest and highest point. Now mark a horizontal line underneath your halfway point 3/4 inch below and cut along this line. Next we can take the internal facing fabric template again over some external facing fabric, and this time scribe around the bottom half and cut. When laid over the internal facing fabric, the two external facing fabrics should be the same shape, with a 3/4 inch overlap in the middle. Hopefully you can begin to see now where we can reach in and turn the fabric right side out once it's all sewn together. Here's a future example for you. Now this next step is completely optional, but if you would like to add pockets to your blinds, then you can do so in the following steps. Taking the offcut from your external facing fabric from earlier, we're going to cut it to 1/4 of the width of the entire blind, and do a similar thing for our internal facing fabric, using our template once more to scribe around. Just a quick note as well, if you're using a pattern material, be sure to line it up to give you a nice seamless look. Hopefully now you can see the blind coming together. We've got our external facing fabric in 2 parts so that we can reach through and turn it the right way out. We've got our internal facing fabric, as well as the 2 bottom fabrics for the pocket. Next up, I'd like to add some piping to the top of my pocket. And for this, I'm using some piping that measures a 1/4 inch or a 7mm around the corded part with 1/2 inch or 12mm tails. Measure the width of the pocket and cut some of that piping to size. Now we can begin to apply some basting tape to the pocket to hold it together when we sew. I'm using 1/4 inch basting tape, but you can use thicker or alternatively pin your pieces together. Once the basting tape is firmly pressed in place, we can remove the backing to reveal the double-sided sticky side. Next, we want to lay our piping over the basting tape. We want the corded part of the piping to be at the bottom, with the tails lined up with the edge of the fabric. Press it all firmly in place and then lay some more basting tape over this again, and this time put the external facing fabric over the top. This will later be turned inside out, and this helps you visualize the process. Now I'm going to set the sewing machine to a straight stitch around 3 to 4mm in length and place a piping or zipper foot onto your sewing machine. Take the pocket and starting from one end of the horizontal line, sew a few stitches forward and then a few stitches back to hold the thread in position. Then we can continue all the way across the horizontal line, taking your time and ensuring that the stitching is nice and tight into the piping. Once you reach the opposite side, sew a few stitches back and a few stitches forward, lift the foot and cut away any excess thread. Now if we turn our pocket inside out, you'll see that the fabric lays right way out, the stitching is completely hidden and leaves a very clean finish. Now to sew our pocket in place, we want to first take our internal facing fabric and have it face side up and apply some basting tape or pin that pocket in place over the bottom quarter of the fabric. I'm going to opt for a general purpose sewing foot at this point, but be sure to set up a guide on your sewing machine to allow a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Sew around the entire bottom quarter, remembering to go back and forth over the stitching at the very start and end. This next step is also optional, but you can find the halfway point along the width of the pocket and draw a vertical line. Stitch across this line and you can divide it into 2 pockets. To sew the entire blind together, we'll now be using the same method as the pocket. Lay the internal facing fabric face side up and apply basting tape around the entire perimeter. Remove the backing and then we can go ahead and take our piping, roughly lay it around the perimeter and cut it to size. Press the piping firmly in place and be sure to leave a 1 inch overlap at the very end. Next we're going to take a stitch unpicker. We're going to use this to unpick the thread on the piping by 1 inch. Once it's free, we'll pull the fabric back from the cord and cut the 1 inch of excess cord, leaving the fabric intact. You should now be able to comfortably butt one end of the cord to the other and use the excess fabric to carry over and give a seamless finish. With all the piping now in place, we can once again apply more basting tape around the perimeter, this time starting over the piping tails. Before placing the external facing fabric over the top, we need to apply a hem on the raw edge of the first piece with that additional 3/4 of an inch. Now a hem is where you fold a raw edge over and sew down it to give a cleaner finish and prevent the fabric from unravelling. With the fabric face side down, we can place basting tape along the bottom edge, fold this edge 1/2 inch up, and this will later be sewn permanently in place. We can now take that top section of the external facing fabric and baste it into place. Repeat with the bottom section, ensuring that it overlaps the top section so that the raw edge won't be visible once turned inside out. Check that all the edges line up and simply lift off the basting tape and repress if anything needs adjusting. With your piping or zipper foot on again, take the blind over to the sewing machine and sew around the entire perimeter. As you approach the point where the two ends of the piping cord meet, be sure they and the fabric marry up nicely and readjust if necessary. Sewing over the piping cord on the tops of the pocket may seem counterintuitive as well, but by doing so, the raw edges of the piping will be hidden from sight. Once complete, you can go ahead and reach into the fabric and pull the blind right side out. Be sure to push your fingers right into the corners as you go. The shape of the fabric should mirror that of the original paper template, with a little extra coming from the piping, which will help ensure that no light will be able to seep in around the edges. Next, we'll need to take our paper template once more and draw it around the entire perimeter onto our insulation. I'm using foil insulation that is around 3 to 4 mm thick. Once this is done, we're going to cut it to size and then we can place it inside the newly sewn cover. Make any adjustments as necessary if it doesn't fit straight away. In a second, we're going to stitch across the width of the blind, dividing it into quarters. Before we do so though, we're going to flip the blind over and add basting tape to the external facing side where our two pieces of fabric line up in the middle. This will help hold it into place, and later we'll stitch across it to help keep it shut. We can now divide our blind into quarters and use fabric chalk to mark a horizontal line across the entire width of the blind. With our lines in place, it's simply a case of just following them and stitching all the way across. And there we have it, an almost complete blind. All we need next is just a means of attaching it to the window itself. I'm going to be using suction cups that will be thread through some eyelets, and to do so we'll need the following tools. First up then, we're going to take our punch. Now these can be bought as part of a pack including the eyelets. Be sure to use this on a table or piece of fabric that you're not too fond of. Simply hold it in position and use a hammer and give it a good whack. This should now create the desired hole for the eyelet to be fed through shortly. Now there's two parts to the eyelet, one of which has a slightly longer neck which will be fed through the fabric, and then the smaller, thinner one is going to be used to actually secure the eyelet in place. Simply place the eyelet through and then put the stand underneath to support it. We can then place the thinner piece on top. I'm going to take the other part of our tool which has a tapered end and slot it into place. Again, using the hammer, give it a good whack and this should help seal the eyelet. And there we have it. All we have to do now is place some suction cups through the holes, and it's complete. So thanks very much for watching, everybody. I hope this was useful. Feel free to send me some pictures of some of the work that you've done, and happy travels.